Let's jump right in. We've got an explainer today covering a highly specific, yet literally game-changing update in Claude Code version 2.1.175. We're zeroing in on a brand new managed setting called enforceAvailableModels. So if you're an admin managing Claude Code deployments, listen up, because this is a targeted opt-in control you're absolutely going to want to know about. And hey, if you're a regular user, this is for sure worth your time too, because it could actually change which model pops up as your default when you log in. Okay, let's dive into this. Is your Claude Code deployment actually locked down? I mean, really, ask yourself, how much control do you truly have over which models your teams are using day to day? Before this 2.1175 update, you might have assumed you had strict boundaries in place, but there were actually some surprising administrative loopholes, and that's exactly what this new feature is here to fix.
Defining managed settings.
So what exactly is a managed setting when we're talking about the architecture of Claude Code? It's really the foundational question for this whole explainer.
Well, basically, managed settings are configuration options set directly by an organization's admins, and they're meant to apply broadly across all users within a deployment. One of the absolute most important of these is the available models list. That list dictates exactly which models are allowed to run in your environment. But here's the catch. Historically, before version 2.1.175, this list had a bit of a loophole. It could actually be widened by individual users. Imagine a developer secretly testing out an unapproved, maybe way more expensive beta model using project-level config files. Plus, the list didn't necessarily govern what the system's default model resolves to. So that left a pretty massive gap in top-down admin control, which, as you can guess, could easily lead to some surprise API bills. 2 important security upgrades.
And this brilliantly illustrates our first major change, default model fallback enforcement. See, Claude Code has this built-in concept of a default model. It's just the model the system grabs when a user doesn't explicitly ask for a specific one. Previously, that default could totally accidentally resolve to a model that wasn't even on your allow list. No way, right? But now, with the new setting enabled, if a user doesn't specify a model, the system immediately steps in. It checks the default against your allow list, and if that default happens to be a disallowed model, Claude Code doesn't just crash or throw some confusing error. It simply automatically falls back to the very first model on your allowed list. It's a completely seamless enforcement of your rules. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is our second big upgrade, locking out downstream overrides. Like we talked about, local user configurations, or a project's own settings file, used to be able to effectively expand that available models list. They were sneaking unapproved models right back into the ecosystem, even if an admin had explicitly excluded them. But with enforce available models turned on, that backdoor is completely 100% shut. The admin-defined allow list absolutely cannot be overwritten by anyone downstream. I actually love the phrasing from our source material here. The admin-defined allow list is now a hard ceiling. It's such a great spatial metaphor for this new setup. Users and individual projects are still more than welcome to work within those boundaries. They can customize things underneath that ceiling all day long. But they absolutely cannot push past it to override the global rules set by the administrator.
Admins versus end users.
So, on one side of this, we have the administrators. For you, this feature is a massive win for compliance and cost control certainty. You can finally define exactly which models your team is using and actually trust that your configuration will hold strong, regardless of what's written in local project files. And on the other side, we have the end users. For you, the everyday effect is actually pretty simple. Your default model might suddenly change if your organization decides to enable this new setting. And the most important takeaway here is that if your default model does shift automatically, it is entirely expected behavior. It is not a bug. The system is just doing its job, smoothly dropping back to an admin-approved model.
Getting started and next steps.
Okay, the absolute most important thing you need to know about implementing this is that it's strictly opt-in. If you're an admin and you're maybe just not quite ready to enforce these strict boundaries yet, you don't have to change a single thing. Deployments without enforce available models enabled are going to continue to work exactly as they always have. Without the flag turned on, the available models list acts just like it did before version 2.1.175. So no surprise breakages. Literally nothing changes unless you actively choose to flip that switch. But if you are ready to dig deeper and actually implement this, here are a couple of excellent resources to check out. First, for the full Claude Code manual and some really deep coverage of managed settings in general, you'll want to head over to claudemaster.net. It's an independent, plain English guide that's built specifically to help you get the most out of Claude. And second, if you're looking for the raw technical nuts and bolts of this release, just point your browser to the official changelog over on GitHub. So we've successfully demystified the enforceAvailableModels update. You've seen how it brilliantly handles default model fallbacks on its own and how it permanently closes that pesky loophole for downstream overrides. The tools for absolute cost and compliance control are literally sitting right at your fingertips. So the only question left to ask yourself is, are you ready to enforce your model boundaries? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and happy configuring.